Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session of Denver Startup Week, Forming and Managing Boards. If we could have all of you either take a seat, and this isn't like church or grade school. You can actually sit up front. I'm Barbara Bauer, and I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Boardbound. And our objective is to get more women on company boards and nonprofit boards. And we have an awesome panel this morning, but I'd first like to start by thanking all of our sponsors. And you can see them up here, there, and yonder. And thanks to all of you for coming and spending your time. There are so many attractive sessions at Denver Startup Week. It's an honor to have you here. I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. And we've selected these panelists for 3 reasons. They're all entrepreneurs, they all have experience with boards, and they are all awesome at giving back to the community of founders, investors, entrepreneurs. So Diane, I'm going to start by talking about Diane Miles. She's currently CEO of the best named venture in Denver, Dope Mom Life. And she started out blogging and then learned video production and now has this amazing growth company that helps other organizations and companies be successful at marketing and outreach to communities that they might not have been successful with in the past. Underserved communities, communities of color, and Dope Mom Life is a really interesting venture, and so look it up and learn more about the company and Diane. Charity Huff is my colleague at Boardbound. She's vice chair. She's a serial and successful entrepreneur. She's on several boards herself. She's a graduate of one of our programs, Corporate Boardbound, and also has supported and founded and worked on a number of nonprofits. And then Michael and Carrie are part of the incredible set of resources and people that Denver provides to founders, entrepreneurs, investors. Michael essentially just does everything for entrepreneurs for the city and county of Denver. All okay? Okay. Michael is also an industrial and organizational psychologist with additional degrees in finance and marketing. So an amazing personal set of both academic and experiences that are a resource to all of you who are in the city and county of Denver and elsewhere. He's also the founder and CEO of Coolskins, a pet product that specializes in pet performance wear. And he's been a director of entrepreneurship in a variety of academic organizations, and so we are lucky to have him here. So with that, I want to give you just a bit of insight about the format we're going to have here. I'm going to start by asking you in the audience some questions. And then I'm going to direct some questions to our extremely excellent panelists, and then we're going to follow it with Q&A from you in the audience. So could I see, just hold your hand up, are you now forming a board? Trying to form a board? Have you had personal experience on a board, if you have? What about, is it a company board? Company boards experience? Advisory board experience? Nonprofit board experience? Are there any investors in the audience? Great, thank you. So this is great. You're in the right place because so many of you actually raised your hand that you're interested in forming a board. And that's where I want to start by asking our panelists each to relate a successful experience in their own personal journey about a board that they either formed themselves or joined when it was forming. And once we get through the positive examples, we're going to dig in on the negative examples and the lessons learned. So, Diane, would you start a positive experience? Try Charity's mic.
It works. We're here. Happy Thursday. How many of you have enjoyed Denver Startup Week this year? Back in person? Oh, I love this for us. So a positive experience forming my board. I think I will take it to my experience as I also work for a foundation called the AJL Foundation, and forming our board there and just understanding how radical, that's what people call us, we want it to be in the work that we do, and redoing how grant making is traditionally done, and then also looking at our entire portfolio, 100% of our endowment, and not just the 5% that we expect to fix with the 95% of the money that is harmful in the community, which is usually traditionally invested in foundations. And so we knew we needed a diverse board that would just allow us to do what we needed to do, that wouldn't ask too many questions, but would hold us accountable. And so it has been a journey. We all know the Great Resignation is happening right now, but it's really digging into networks and people that you wouldn't typically see on boards. When our board was founded, it was all white people, and now we are a very diverse board. So I think 70% of our board is made up of Black, Latina, and other communities. I think that's all that I have.
Yes, so I joined a board just as that particular company was going through its seed round, so I was coming in as part of that seed round. We had a venture backed lead investor. We had the lead angel investor, and then I was invited to be the third board member for that organization. And my coming in, we really looked at and leveled up the sophistication of the board, the sophistication of the financials, and the way in which we were consistently looking at the business. And that, to me, was a great success because we now have a format for how we communicate to the entire investor group, how we as a board look at the performance and the key metrics for the business, and we can just jump right past all of that when we get into the board discussions and talk about what's next and what needs to happen, because all of that formality is in place and it's consistent every quarter.
Great. Yeah, so I'll echo everything else that was set up there. Diane mentioned probably one of the most important things when it comes to boards is diversity, right? Not just in the makeup of what the individuals look like on the board, and that they should look and feel like the people that you're serving as part of that organization, but also from the skill set that they bring to the table, right? So from a positive experience, when you're building the board, look for people that have skill sets that you don't, that you and your team members don't, right? So your paid staff doesn't necessarily have those skill sets. And most importantly, for me, where I find successes is when you can recruit people to your board that have what I call pride of ownership, right? So they're as passionate about your organization as you are, right? That's sometimes really hard to find. So make sure when you're going through that process of recruiting and interviewing potential board members that you can get a strong sense that they're going to be your biggest advocate in the process.
I'm just going to add another reflection on that. I think the soft skills that are required for a board to function successfully are as important as the actual hard skills and experiences. So style of communication, priorities, commitment to the mission all make a big difference. So let's now start on what lessons have you learned from less than successful forming board experiences? Diane, we'll start with you.
Oh, please no. Charity, you got the money.
Okay. I currently serve on another board where we are at that inflection point where the founder and some of the founding folks are not necessarily the right people to take that business to the next level. And living this literally every day of every week right now. That is a very difficult conversation to have. It happens with many businesses where the people that get you through that first major growth spike are not necessarily the same operators to get the business to the next major growth spike. And so having those kinds of conversations, I think to Barbara's point, having invested in the soft skills and the dynamics of the board in order to have some of those very direct and difficult decisions has been something that I wish we had invested in more, because now as we're having those difficult decisions, there's hurt feelings, there's all of the kind of emotional pieces that go into it. And it's hard to separate that from what needs to happen in order for the business to continue to grow and thrive.
Yeah, I would echo that too. I normally say I have more college degrees than I like to admit in public, but Barbara called me out on that. So I'll tell you the other thing I hate to admit in public is that I've been on boards for nonprofit organizations and had to fire more executive directors than I like to admit in public. Because oftentimes, especially in the nonprofit world, right, people start those organizations because they're passionate about a mission or a cause or whatever. They're not necessarily great business owners, and they're not necessarily great at taking the organization to the next level. And sometimes there's conflict there, but from a, lessons learned standpoint, when you're building boards, especially for nonprofits, it's very common to have give or get policies, as an example, right? You want those board members to be able to help raise funds for your organization. And if you don't feel that they have the resources to be able to do that, that's potentially a mistake, right? The biggest mistake I see people make, whether it's a nonprofit board or a for-profit board, is bringing in friends or family members, right? So those are really difficult situations to work with, and people like to give everybody titles and do these kinds of things, but you have to think about the organization itself and moving that piece forward. The other piece is not setting proper term limits with your board members, right? So you have to bring in fresh ideas and fresh perspectives on a regular basis in order to continue to progress the organization forward.
And I think the only point that I would add is the disconnect between the board and the communities that are the client that you serve or the communities that you serve. Typically, when you think of a board, you are thinking of a nonprofit, but this is interchangeable for an organization too. If they don't understand the work that you do, why you do it, how you do it, there's a lot of pushback, especially for the people that are on the ground actually doing the work. And so make sure you have a board that understands what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. So I think, like Michael said, they can get behind you and continue to move your organization forward.
I've had way too many of these. So I have another one. I was hired in as an interim CEO for a company that was in trouble. They had raised their Series A. They were floundering. They were not doing well with how they were going to continue to execute. And my big mistake going in was like, oh, well, I'm the interim CEO. I'm here to right the ship, find the right person to move this business forward. I did not invest enough time into the relationship I had with the board while I was going through that interim role. And I only lasted 9 months out of an 18-month contract, and they fired me. Right? Because I wasn't paying close enough attention to that constituency group. I was so focused on the business and executing and market and fundraising and all of the operational pieces, because that's where I felt like that needed to be my energy. And I did not give enough care and feeding to the board, and they felt like I was not hearing and representing their point of view well enough in my execution. And they did. They fired me.
Being, pardon me, being fired is a really good life lesson in general. So don't ever hesitate to be fired, learn from it, and go forth. I actually recommend it because, I learn the most from all my mistakes, more than I do from any successes. I want to give you a name for the situation that Charity talked. So we frequently talk about it in startups. It's called founder syndrome. And many of you are CEOs and founders, and you need to guard yourself. Ask yourself the hard questions all the time. Am I behaving as if the way I've done it is the way we have to always do it going forward? There's another term I'll give you. It's called the tyranny of the well-intentioned. When you don't have great communication skills, those soft skills on your board or your leadership team, you will be driven by people who are well-intentioned but maybe not aligned around the specific, precise goals that you need to achieve. I'd like to change the conversation a little bit to talk about what are the steps in the process to forming a board. Probably many of you have advisors. They may be informal. Some of you may have formed formal advisory boards. Some of you may have formal legal boards of directors if you've gone through seed rounds or other investment rounds. So any of you, would you like to talk about your experience with what process makes sense?
I would recommend first looking at what skill set you feel like you have, your CFO has, maybe your attorney has, and where you might be missing some things, especially if, like if you're bringing in VC or angel, like professional investment money, you probably will have another person sitting on your board in that capacity. So what is that group missing? And this is where diversity comes in. Diversity of experience, diversity of point of views, right? Diversity of communication skills. So truly think through what am I missing so that we have a well-rounded group from that perspective. And I'll pass it around because I'm sure you guys have other ideas along that line.
Yeah, I mean, diversity is always key when you're doing those kinds of things, building team members as well, on your organization, not just in your board, but also thinking about the type of board that you want or that you need for your organization, right? So when you think of boards, typically we're talking about boards that are helping govern the organization, right? And the strategic direction of the organization. But there's advisory boards, right, that don't actually have that oversight and don't necessarily govern the direction in which the organization's going, but they provide valuable insight in those types of things. So just be thinking about really what it is that you need from the board. I help businesses get started all day long, every day. I've started 6 nonprofits. I help nonprofits get started every day. And the first thing people say, I have this great idea. I'm going to start this nonprofit. Can you help me find board members? I'm like, well, what have you done so far as a Well, we haven't done anything. I just have this idea, right? So you don't have to race to try to get across the finish line with a building out a full board, right from the get-go. You can wait till you start to really shape what the vision and the mission is of the organization itself. And the other key thing I always try to encourage people to work towards building boards that are substantial enough in size that you can get the valuable insight that you need, but not so big that you can't make decisions, right? And typically keep them to odd numbers, right? So I would like somewhere in between 7 and 13 board members, depending on your organization. Yeah. Yep.
So for nonprofit, I don't know that I would have that big of a board for a fiduciary or an advisory board for a for-profit business. Is that fair?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as a business owner, I don't have a board of directors because nobody's going to fire me from my company. But I have a board of advisors, so I have 5. Is that? I feel good with 5. But how I found them was, what am I not good at, and who can I get free work from, really? As a startup, right, you're like, who can help me get to where I'm going, who has already built a successful business and career in whatever they do, and obviously with the skills that I'm missing, so they can help. So I have an attorney on my board because I paid an attorney a couple of times to do some contracts, and I was like, oh, well, they're expensive. So how can we get one that loves me, supports me, and understands my vision and wants to help us out? So that's really how I built my board. We have marketing, an attorney, a creative, and an executive from a large video production agency.
It's on. One of the things to think about is what your 3 to 5 year strategic objectives are, and to identify from what each of our panelists has said, the really important skills that are necessary to support that 3 to 5 year trajectory. We frequently see entrepreneurs who are very successful but haven't really planned out, for example, a capital strategy. And there's no one on their board that's experienced in that sort of capital strategy when you're going from a fairly small venture to a rapidly scaling ventures. Would any of you like to comment on that?
I think I can. We'll see. So when I first started Dope Mom Life, which is a full-service video production company, so the name has absolutely nothing to do with the work that we do. I'm loud enough, though. Can everybody hear me?
Use the mic, it's always better. It is.
It's so loud, though.
It's good.
Is the mic better?
No, because the video can't hear it, so you're using the mic.
Okay, we'll stick with the mic, I guess. So I lost it. It was there. Now it's gone. What was I going to say? Yeah. So as a business owner, so obviously Dope Mom Life was my baby. I thought it was my baby until my business coach was like, if you had to choose between your actual babies, who aren't babies, they're adults now, and Dope Mom Life, who would you save? And I was like, of course, DJ and TT. She was like, exactly, this isn't your baby. And especially for my community, right, business, we don't always look at business as a way to create wealth in our community. So we oftentimes use it as an option because whatever has happened in corporate America or whatever, we start a business and we're like, I'm not going to deal with that anymore. And once I released the attachment from Dope Mom Life being my baby and understood like where I want it to go in the next 3 to 5 years, which is hopefully selling my business and making a profit and going and doing some of the other stuff that I want to do. And I thought I was like, I'm going to work at Dope Mom Life forever. I'll be the CEO of Dope Mom Life forever. But that is not what I need. So I knew I needed to have a board that would help me get to that point. So I had to bring on a board member who understood how to scale a business and get acquired. So I could go be a developer, which is
awesome. I am an early stage investor as well as being an entrepreneur. So I look at it from both sides. As an investor, I want to see that 3 to 5 year plan because I want to see how you're going to be a good steward of my money and how you're going to make me a return. So what I'm looking for is what are the milestones that you are attempting to hit in order to show all of us that the market is responding to you, that you understand how to execute, and that you'll be ready for the next round of investment. So if you don't have somebody on your advisory board that can help you with that, I would suggest you seek out some of those types of services. I'm a member of Rocky's Venture Club, and that to me is one of the best organizations to help young businesses get ready for investment, and they will put you through the paces and help you with those questions.
Yeah, good. Rocky Venture Club's a great organization, too, for early-stage businesses. They do a ton of programming and have classes and resources that can help you with a lot of these topics that we're talking about here. You mentioned earlier, I gave a board count for nonprofit organizations. Typically, if you're going to go out and you're going to raise outside investment capital, you should expect to be planning for board seats for those investors to be in your organization. And again, they're typically, what's really nice about working with outside investors, if that is the route that you're going, they typically have somebody in their network or their circle that has the skill set that they know your organization needs, right? So it might not be necessarily the lead investor, say from a Rockies Venture Club, but one of the investors or somebody in their network who's really good at the strategic initiative that you need. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday that I've been a longtime colleague with here in Colorado, and he's in the healthcare tech space. He's an investor, but he's also on boards for a lot of these organizations, but he's so skilled in what he does. Breaks down like 10 years worth of regulations and barriers in the healthcare tech space for these organizations that he invests in, because he knows who to go to, how to approach it, how to do that, and that as a floundering or a budding entrepreneur, it's really difficult for you to understand those barriers, right? Most of us can teach ourselves how to learn, what is it, steps that we need to do, but when you can get somebody on your team that says, I can do that, and take all that time frame out of it for you because I've been doing it for a long time.
One of the challenges when you are forming a board is avoiding that just invite your friends. So you've done the research, you've looked at skills matrices, you need to interview this person whom you don't know yet. So what's your guidance about interviewing for a board seat versus interviewing for someone on your leadership team?
Sure, I can start. I'm gonna go right back to that pride of ownership piece of it, right? Because you want somebody that's gonna be your biggest advocate in the process, right? And Mackenzie, thanks for being here. I feel like I have my own advocate in the room. You've been at least to 3 or 4 of my sessions this week, right? So thanks, yeah, thank you. It's nice having a groupie. No, but seriously, you really want to find somebody that's going to bring the skill set for you and be driven to see you be successful, right? We can all reach out and find friends and mentors and different things to bounce ideas off of, and that's fine, but you want somebody that's going to help you move the needle forward. So, you should always be thinking about this when you interview anyway, right? Whether you're looking for a job or whether you're trying to recruit board members, it's a mutual exchange, right? And you want to know what they're going to be able to do for you besides them just having a cool title that says I'm on your board or your organization, right? Because the last thing you want to do as a busy entrepreneur, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit organization, trying to manage teams and all the stresses and the work of building an organization, is manage board members, right? You don't want to be doing that.
For the board that I mentioned earlier, where as the venture capital investor was coming in and I was added into that board, I so appreciated the approach that the founder took. So he asked for recommendations from networks and peers that he had across the industry. So that's how he and I came to meet one another. We had conversations with regard to my background and all of that, so he could be like, yes, she checks the boxes in the experience. Then he had me take a personality test. And then we came back together with the other board members, and we discussed how I make decisions, how I approach making decisions, how I vocalize my point of view. It was all the soft skills. That was really the majority of the conversation, and I just thought it was brilliant because then he knew that I was going to be able to interact and be successful with the other people that I was being partnered with.
I think they all had great points. I haven't done the test yet. I think that's a great one. The one question that I make sure to ask anybody that joins our team or comes on our board of advisors, even though we're full now, is what do you want your legacy at DML to be? Because I think that's really important. I know what my legacy is on any of the boards or organizations that I serve on. And you always want to leave something better than you found it, right? So what is your legacy here? What do you want it to be here? What do you want us to say when you walk away from this? So when you walk away from this, or we all do.
Let's talk now about managing a board and what do you do when there could be conflict on the board. So how do you manage those tough conversations?
They're gonna happen, so you should be prepared for it. No different than the tough conversations you have to have as a CEO managing your operating team. Invest in those relationships so that when you get to where you have to have some of those tough conversations, they can be done in a professional and a thoughtful manner. Like I said, I didn't pay close enough attention to that one particular board, and I didn't have as good of a relationship with them as I thought I did. When you do have to have those tough conversations, whether they're like sitting in the boardroom or prep for or follow up after, always come from a fact-based point of view. I'm saying this for these reasons. Never have it be a personal attack. Make your argument, and then stop and truly listen to the other person. Let he or she make their counter arguments, and then figure out where you are close together, where you're far apart, and then engage the rest of the group in having the bigger conversation. But this whole like, well, I'm gonna come over here and we're gonna have a private conversation, and then I'm gonna, right? Like, that is detrimental to a professional board and to the way in which you want to actually manage to a successful outcome.
Yeah, that's good. I always say that when people leave organizations, they work themselves out of the organization. That could be a positive working themselves out or a negative working themselves out. It's up to them. But probably the most critical and important piece is make it as objective as possible, right? It's really about documenting everything. Most nonprofit boards will have bylaws. If you don't have bylaws, you should certainly have bylaws that talks about the roles and responsibilities of all the members of the organization, both the staff as well as the board members themselves. Other for-profit organizations will have policies to that as well. And always hold those individuals accountable for whatever their responsibilities are within the organization. And if they're not, whatever that accountability is, they have to be at a certain number of meetings, they have to generate enough revenue, they have to help with legal contracts as an example, and they're not following through on that, make sure that it's documented. You don't get yourself caught up in some internal political backroom chatter with other board members about, well, we don't like Steve.
I don't have much to add. I think what they said was great. I'm a processor, which means I have to take a beat before I have a conversation, and I found that really useful in dealing with my team and my board of advisors. And so whenever there's a conflict, I don't have a conversation right away. I allow us to take a beat and go process and then schedule a conversation to have face-to-face. And I believe in face-to-face. Don't do anything over email. Don't do anything over text. Make sure you have a face-to-face conversation, right? Because people can interpret something any way that they feel you're coming at them. So those are really the two kind of rules I live by. I won't continue to engage because I don't argue. If you hear my voice, it's pretty chill, so I just don't do that. So we're going to take a beat and then come back and have a conversation face-to-face. And yeah, don't do the whispering and, yeah, I'm so sick of them and I'm going to fire them or whatever.
One of the things I'll add is that no matter how early stage your company is, or what the circumstances are, whether it's an informal advisory board or a formal legal board of directors, one of the things that respects that structure is to prepare properly, use board agendas, take board meeting minutes, properly provide pre-reading so that the board conversation can focus on the issue as opposed to preparing to talk about the issue. And Diane's so right. I'm an introvert, and if I can send an email at 11 at night, I'd rather do that than find time one-for-one. Lesson learned, take her advice, do it, because you have to relate to the individual on your board as well as to the board as a whole. And you've got to be brave enough to call out respectfully behavior that isn't contributing to the overall venture success. Any other insights about how to make boards really wonderful?
Well, I'm just going to share a resource for those of you that are starting nonprofits or in the nonprofit space. If you're not familiar with a resource called GuideStar, it's a great tool for you to go to. It's kind of a membership organization, but I think you can glean enough information off of it for free to at least get yourself started. But they set a lot of nice benchmarks for what nonprofits should be from a standard. So, you know, how much of your annual budget should be spent on administrative tasks, as an example, how to create bylaws and different policies within the organizations, and just general best practices there. So it's a good resource that I normally refer people over to for that.
I'd like to talk for a moment about your opportunities to join boards. And so I'd like to ask each of our panelists for some insight from their personal experience about how they joined a board, what they looked for, what made it the right board to choose. Each of you, or those of you who are founders, automatically are attractive to boards because you have that kind of business experience. And being on a board is a wonderful opportunity to really leverage the impact you'd like to have in the world.
Yeah, I'll just start because I have the microphone. First and foremost, I mean, be mindful of your time, right? Because there's going to be a lot of people that want to reach out to you and want you to be on their boards for different reasons. And you can get stretched thin pretty quickly. So be mindful of that, understand what you can and can't support in your life from that. Some boards are like, we meet 2 times a month, and some are like, we'll see you twice a year, right? So somewhere in between is probably where you want to be, depending on where you're at in your life and your journey and what your contribution. Typically, I would find it fairly hard to believe that people would want to be on boards for organizations that aren't mission aligned to what your personal values are and things of that nature, so hopefully there. But for me, it's about how the organization is run and operated, right? So people had been asked to be on boards where they've had the same executive director for 40 years, and their annual budget's $175,000, and she hasn't paid herself in 10 years, right? That's not the group that I'm going to be able to move the needle on, and it's not somebody that I want to try to get in the middle of that and really restructure that organization so it can really be out there and focused on the mission that they claim to be focused on.
I'm going to share an awesome story about an awesome early stage founder CEO. Going on 4 years ago, she and I were both members of this great online network for investors and women and entrepreneurs and women who start up. And she smartly went through all of the people that were in that network and started reaching out to people that kind of filled the holes that she didn't have early on in her business in order to put together an informal advisory board to start with. So she reached out to me, never met her before. She just said, you seem like an awesome lady. These are the things that you do that I could see being of great benefit to me and my business. Here's how awesome I am. Here's how awesome my business is. She and I met for coffee. I thought she was an amazing entrepreneur, that she had everything that I would ever want in a startup founder. So I started acting as an informal advisor. Flash forward, she said last night we were having drinks to celebrate. She's like, I'm an overnight success, and it only took me 6 years, right? So she is about to close on a huge funding round, right? She's going to formalize her board. Sky's the limit. And she smartly just sought out people early on that she knew could help her. And we met on, like a quarterly basis. But then, like, something would happen. She would be in, like, oh my God, I gotta talk through whatever it might be. And there was many over the course of the last 4 years. I remember she called me because she was about to sign a huge development contract March of 2020, and she was like, I just need to talk through with somebody else. Like, I feel like this is a really bad idea, right? So everything. And now she's in a place that we can all celebrate with her, and she is gonna be a huge success. I can't wait for us to be celebrating her big, huge exit in 5 years, because I know it's coming for her.
We have some confetti for her. I really do. So I think as an entrepreneur and somebody who's on a lot of boards and committees and does a lot of things, now I'm really intentional. I had a year of yes where I just said yes to everything, and so I was on a lot of boards that did not make sense. I was doing a lot of things. I was like, why am I here? And who sent me? So I had to fire myself from a lot of those boards and just be like, I don't think I'm the best option for you. And I had to get really intentional with the boards I serve on. How are they going to help me grow my business? So it's not just me giving, but also like, what is this exchange? And how do we benefit each other? So now the boards that I'm on are very intentional. I don't serve on committees or organizations that we don't mutually benefit each other. So that, and for me right now, that is me growing my business. And then also I have like a couple boards that I'm just really passionate about and love them. So Girls Inc., I've been a volunteer and I've taught classes, and I was on their marketing, I started their marketing committee. And then now I'm a board member, obviously, because I love girls and Girls Inc. But I definitely look at boards and organizations that will help me grow my business. Who do I need to build relationships with that serve on those boards? And then I'm like, yeah, I'll join your board. And don't overwhelm yourself, though. I did that for a minute, and now I had to stop. But like DEI, I'm the DEI co-chair for Denver Startup Week, and that's something I love and I'm passionate about, and get to bring a lot of great ideas to this event that we're all at. So I'm very intentional now with the boards I join, and as entrepreneurs, and even if you're a nonprofit, I hate that we think nonprofit like it's charity work or something like that. It's a business, and we have to start looking at nonprofits as a business. And so you have to be intentional with the board you serve on, as well as nonprofit leaders and EDs.
We are going to open this up for Q&A now. We've got our first question over here.
Great question, and I'll start because I have the mic, and now I'm like warmed up and have drank most of my coffee, so my brain is working again. So I will say that I sit down and I'm all about building relationships. So if you sit down for a coffee with me, by the time we leave, we're hugging, we're in love. It's like, it's magic, and we'll be best friends for the rest of our lives. I'm really good at that. So I believe in building an authentic relationship with people. So every advisor that I have, every mentor that I have, we sat down and we had a really in-depth conversation, and I understood them as a human. What were they passionate about? What made them tick? What did they want? What did they see how did they see their future looking? Like, I just built a real relationship and understood that person. And oftentimes, we're humans, and for the most part, I believe we all just want to do good and help others. And so you'll find people who just want to do good and help others. Most of my advisors are later on in their careers, or they've sold their businesses and are now just investors. But they have a very specific skill or expertise that they can help me with, and now they're advising people, and that's what they want to do with their time. And so I say look for, and obviously you want to find some younger people too, but usually they'll join your team. They won't be on your board of advisors, but build that relationship, understand who they are and why they would want to help you and your organization?
Yeah, I think it comes back to passion, right? So the conversation I just shared with you about this founder several years ago, I could see her as somebody that I just wanted to help. So that, I think if you come from that approach and say, I have this passion around solving this problem, reaching this market, whatever that is, I would appreciate some of your time. I realize that it's something I'm asking you to give me. And as long as you set it up to say, this is how much time, this is how I want to use you, right? I think you will find people be very open to it. A lot of us are a little bit further along in our career where we feel like we should give back. I had some amazing advisors through the course of my career and through the course of my ventures. So I do feel like that is a bit of give back. So I don't think you will have any trouble, and this is the perfect forum this week to approach people and say, we had a really awesome conversation. Can we have a second one over coffee and see if you're somebody that could help us? But with an advisory board, and Barbara, I'd be curious about your opinion, most of them are not compensated in an advisory role, right? It's more when you get into a board of directors or a fiduciary responsibility that there's an expectation around compensation, whether that's equity or cash. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I agree with that. And it can be very interesting to consider someone as an advisor who is obviously potential for a formal board director once you get to that point, obviously.
I'm glad they provided that clarification, because I was going to say that's all crap. It's all about money. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, I think you've heard it here, right? I mean, you're in a state, in a city that's the number one word you probably heard all throughout the week is collaboration, right? And a lot of the work that Carrie and I do through the Office of Economic Development and Opportunity is, I always say, we help companies get plugged into the ecosystem, right? So we work with a lot of companies from around the United States that have chosen Denver as their new home, or international companies that say, we're coming to the United States and we pick Denver over other cities, and then we get them plugged in. And this is a true story, and I know Carrie does this as well. I'll reach out to the CEO of a company that's in Denver that's been doing very, very well, and I'll say, hey, I got a company that's coming to Denver. They do exactly what you do. Will you talk to their CEO? Yeah, absolutely. Send them over, right? I advise hundreds of companies throughout the course of the year, and from the advisory standpoint, my motivation is I just want to see you be successful, right? To me, that's a win. I don't need that in my pocketbook, and it's a relatively easy job from my perspective, right? Because we have a conversation, I give you some homework, you go do the homework or you don't. If you do the homework, you come back to me. If you don't do the homework, then you're not going to move that project forward, and it's not a terrible burden on my time. Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon for organizations to have multiple boards for different purposes. I wouldn't necessarily encourage you to think of that as the initial path forward. It just really comes down to the intention of those boards and how they're going to be used. I'm a board member, I'm an advisory board member, an official advisory board member on an organization that doesn't have a governance board. Right, and I'm on plenty of governance boards as well. And then typically what you see in those board organizations is they're broken out then by committees, right? So you use the example of legal, but you might, if that's something that's really important and needed in the organization, you might have a legal committee that's still part of the board.
Any questions from this side? Yes, sir? This could be a very interesting answer, so I'll let. So I think the question was, if you have a key customer or key man, should that person be invited onto the board?
I would go back to don't have friends and family on your board. So think of them as, can they truly contribute to the growth of my business 5 years out? Will the relationship still be important to the business? And I would really look at it like from a horizon standpoint, because there's other ways you probably can solidify and secure that relationship without marrying them and asking them to be on your board.
Yeah, it's easier to get divorced than it is to get rid of a board director, so.
What I would say is that, so I want to probe a little bit deeper. If we're talking about a customer as an example, and you're not a publicly traded company, or you're not a company that, and they're not necessarily an investor, I would probably advise against it, because it sounds to me like there's potentially a risk of conflict of interest there, right? It's like having the senator on your organization that also votes on the policy that makes your organization grow, but I guess that happens in the United States, right? But, you know, I think there's a conflict of interest there. Now, it's very common, obviously, right, for publicly traded companies, their board members are comprised of shareholders, right? And they have a vested interest in the success and the growth of the organization. It's very common for investors in the venture capital or angel world to take a board seat because they have a vested interest in seeing that the organization succeed. But it's very uncommon to see a customer or a key man as a board member unless they're what we would call a corporate investor, right? So there's a lot of organizations, as an example, that are working in a particular field or an industry, and you know, Johnson & Johnson, as an example, in the healthcare space says, hey, we're gonna be a corporate sponsor of that, because if whatever you're creating grows, we can be the key customer down the road. That's common to see them in a board position, but just you know, an everyday company, an LLC or a C Corp that doesn't have outside investors, it would be very uncommon to see a customer as a board member.
Before I answer or ask any of you for questions, how many of you feel comfortable with your own personal knowledge of best practices in governance? A couple. Because that's a frequent area where founders in particular may not have had much opportunity actually learn about best practices in governance or even what the legal requirements are. And I'm going to put in a very quick plug. Boardbound offers for women, corporate boardbound and nonprofit boardbound, to help you learn about the requirements of board governance and how to be an effective leader on board governance. We've got some flyers up here at the front, so if you want to learn more about it, we'll give you one of those flyers. Okay, back to the audience.
Yeah, I'll start just because, so it's the topic that you're talking about is interesting, and then it's muddied with the gender and the race issue in there on top of that. So I run a program at the city called Scale Up, which is like a post-accelerator program. And through that program, there's many times where CEOs that are part of my program have a realization about 3/4 of the way through the program, like, oh no, I'm not the right person to run this organization. And part of that process is we help them find the new CEO, and they still remain part of the organization. And in those examples that I gave, and over the last 5 years, I'm just thinking of it at a high level, all of those individuals that went through that process were all white, male, cisgendered males. So then you add on the racial piece of that, and I know Diane's certainly got some opinions on this, and she's been around the block quite a few times on that. I'm going to have to ponder a little bit on the resources to support really that racial piece of it. I would be happy to talk with your friend and your contact and introduce her to several women that I know that have really stood up and done a really nice job of pushing back against a systemic problem.
I won't make too much comment here, but I would say she probably needs to look at the makeup of that board. When are some of those people rolling off, and can she recalibrate who she has on that board so that she feels like she has the support? Because I can't even imagine. That would be horrible. Yeah. Oh, I got you. Yeah, yeah. Right. Yeah, indeed. But I mean, if I was that CEO, that's what I would be looking for is, okay, how can I fire one or more of these board members and replace them with people that are going to be of more support to me?
Yeah, which is why I made the joke earlier that I wouldn't have a board because they weren't going to fire me, right? And it's a joke, but it's also very intentional. You're not going to fire me from my organization. I know what I'm doing, but I also understand that there's going to be gaps in my expertise, especially as a CEO and a leader, because I have historically been kept out of certain conversations, especially around wealth and money. And so with that understanding, I made sure that the board of advisors that I have also understand that. You're not talking to somebody who isn't brilliant. I can say I am brilliant in my own right. You're talking to someone who, and I've had a lot of privilege in my life, and I understand that too, but I also am a Black woman in America, which is not, we are probably the most unprotected person in America. And so I understand that I needed a board of advisors that would protect me, right? With great change, you have to have protectors along the way. And so I made sure I had protectors that understood and that acknowledged that there has been historical racism that have kept me out of certain conversations, my family out of certain conversations. So to your friend, there's no resources for us other than having a sisterhood of Black women who are also CEOs and understand and can help you go through the process and be your soft place to land. And you can bounce off ideas with, but make sure that your board are full of protectors and that you're not just left open.
Just one last comment on that. And again, I know the race and the gender issue really clouds the issue. There's many, many times where people have to step up and say, I'm not the right person to be leading as the CEO of this organization. That's a very valid thing. And that's a point that we all have to kind of address at some point.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to add that there are resources at Rocky's Venture Club, where I was an executive director for a few years, to really support founders and help them with whatever the challenges are. So please do acquaint yourself with what those resources are. We are about at the end, and I'm going to, unfortunately, I know we've got a lot of questions, but hopefully our panelists will be able to stay for a while. I want to ask for just one last salient, important, critical piece of advice from each of you.
Mine always is make sure whatever you're doing, you're happy, because you won't do good if it's not. And so make sure you're making yourself happy. I think that's more important than anything else in this world. The rest of it will fall into line.
My family, we have a motto that sits by the back door as you leave every day, and it's work hard and be kind, right? So every day, show up ready to do your very best, put in every hour, every ounce of who you are, And then be graceful to the people around you, right? Treat them with kindness, understand where they're coming from, make sure that they understand the hill that you're asking them to climb with you, and that has been successful for me.
Yeah, I would echo all of those things. Normally, what I would probably say is think bigger, right? So whether you're building a for-profit organization or a nonprofit organization, think bigger. And I mean, I coach a lot of nonprofits on a regular basis, and their eyes kind of fall out of the back of their head when I say, I really want you to strive towards an annual budget of $10 million or more. Because statistically speaking, that's when a nonprofit organization becomes sustainable, right? And up until that point, you're just constantly chasing dollars. And we all know that that's an energy suck, but it's a necessity for those types of organizations. But if you can reach that level of threshold, you can really learn to appreciate what the organization can accomplish, and that's the same for for-profit organizations as well. So think bigger.
And I want to say a special thank you to Carrie. Carrie is actually on our committee for Nonprofit Board Bound, and she and I have worked together on that. And she's an awesome resource in her own right in this building. The city and county of Denver do amazing programs in support of all of you. Rocky's Venture Club does, and of course Board Bound is really focused on offering programs that will help women be successful board members as well as board leaders. And if I can find Ramona, who was up front, oh great, Ramona has got flyers about corporate board bound, nonprofit board bound, and general board bound. And for those of you who are founders and want to form a formal board, typically with one or more of your rounds of investment, we have a program called Board Connect where we work with CEOs and help them find a woman candidate with exactly the right skills for whatever they need on their board to support their strategic objectives. So let's give a round of applause to the awesome panelists. Thank you.
And just one last comment. Mackenzie, I just wanted to let you know I'm going to be on a panel in this very room in 30 minutes. So if you just want to stick around, that'd be great.